it's really another issue is also I find like taking back to where you were talking about being an adolescent. I was recently listening to a podcast. I don't know if you've listened to it, Rich Roll, and he was talking to Lisa D'Amour, which is like a psychologist, and she was
Yeah.
looking at the emotional lives of teenagers, navigating adolescence and puberty and that kind of thing. And they discussed how challenging a time it can be, not only for parents, but also the adolescents themselves going through a phase of self-development and self-discovery. And in
Mhm.
that paper I was referring to before, that systematic review from 2021, there was a paper in there that I came across from Graham Zhao and Gartner 2005, and they looked at children 4 years of age, and
Yeah.
this is a time when they start manifesting what's called in-group positivity. And so, if you were looking at what's the I guess direct opposite to that would be the out group, and they're the minority groups, so those of color, disability,
Mhm.
alternative sexual orientation. And essentially, at this age, children start manifesting in-group positivity bias, and they seemingly extrapolate self-related positivity towards groups that they personally
Yeah, of
affiliate
course.
with. And I think that's a really toxic, and to
Yeah.
have that being kids developing that at the age of 4, especially, leading into a time like adolescence where they start to develop, a bit of self-meaning, purpose,
Mhm.
and who they identify and where they sort of fit in society. That surely was a huge challenge for you too. And I'm not sure, as you were talking about where you're working in education early on before you moved to London, did you see much
Yeah.
of that? And how was that kind of experience for you personally?
I think so. It's human nature because we've got the fight or flight built in. It's human nature to gravitate towards people that we can see ourselves in because back in the day we had to stick to people that we felt secure with. So that's kind of alluding to what you're talking about. So this is why inclusion and representation is really important. So when I started school, I was initially put in what we would identify as a special school. So a school that was designed for deaf, disabled, or neurodivergent individuals. And most of my peers, they had cognitive disabilities. So I have a physical disability. And I vividly remember, so I must have been 4 years old, 5 years old. And I remember I have got some of the most profound memories of being in that school because I felt like I did not fit.
Belong, yeah.
I was put into this school with other disabled kids, and because I could communicate in a very different way to how they could communicate, I really really struggled. So it was determined quite quickly that that wasn't probably the best place for me. So I was then transferred to mainstream school. And it's really funny because my infant school and primary school, when I first showed up and there's this petite little girl in a big power wheelchair, and I remember all the kids were crowding around me and kind of, timid and not too sure what to say. But then we all went and played out on the field at lunchtime, and there was little daisies growing on the grass. And all the children, one of them obviously started it, but all the kids started picking the daisies and putting them on my wheelchair, my foot plate. And then after that, I was just part of the gang. Like I was just, one of the kids. And then when it was time for me to go up to secondary school, we actually were going to emigrate to New Zealand, funnily enough. So we've got family in New Zealand, and then my dad suddenly dropped down dead of a brain hemorrhage. So that kind of really put a a spin on everything. So it went from me being supposed to be homeschooled, kind of in a camper van heading all over New Zealand to then having to go to a high school. And when I applied for the high school that I wanted to go to, where all my friends were going, they said that they didn't want to make the high school accessible. And this is back in the days when they didn't have to adhere to the Disability Discrimination Act on that level. So I actually had to go to a completely different secondary school. And that's when I was all of a sudden the kid in the wheelchair rather than Samantha. So I'm a big believer that if we have positive reinforcement, if we have an inclusive society, and we kind of show the positives from a young age, then you can completely negate all the harmful stereotypes. I feel like I was living proof of that. When I was a teacher, I think that my presence, and not to sound egotistical, but I genuinely believe that having a teacher in a position of power and hierarchy, who has such a physical disability, impacted how the kids interacted with the other deaf, disabled, and neurodivergent kids. I definitely do, in a positive way. And they would come up to me and they would say, "Oh, miss, I saw a girl in a wheelchair when I was shopping and I said hello to her." So this is what we need. We need, the problem with systemic ableism and institutionalized ableism is we are all guilty of our unconscious bias, and it's going to take years and years and years to unpack those harmful views that society still has surrounding disability. But all I say is, the pandemic has totally shown the world how fragile we are. Like, no one is exempt, no one is a superhuman, and anyone can become disabled at any time. We are indeed the fastest growing minority group, and that is because predominantly we've got an aging population, but there's a whole host of other reasons why that is. So even if you don't know anyone disabled, then I urge you to think about your own future and your own kind of how you would want to live the final years perhaps of your life. Would you want to struggle? Would you want to face barriers, or would you like to have a straightforward, easy life as you get a little bit older, and you may acquire a disability? So I really, a lot of the kind of lobbying that I do focuses around things like inclusive design, particularly for homes. Because in the UK at the moment, only 9% of homes meet basic accessibility requirements, standards. So for me, it'd be amazing to see us future-proofing with innovation, like designing for the future. If you're elderly and you become disabled, or whoever you are and you become disabled, wouldn't it be great that you can, just navigate that change in your life in the comfort of your own home?